So good afternoon. Today I'm going to show you how to make focaccia bread by hand. It's a straight dough system, so bulk fermentation is quite small. It's only 20 minutes long. So at the end of the day, I'm just going to go through the, the list of ingredients here, and I'm going to hand mix it on the table. So we start here. I've got 500 grams of strong flour. I have 10 grams of salt. I have 5 grams of rosemary. I have 25 grams of yeast. I have 10 grams of caster sugar. I have 50 grams of olive oil. I have 250 grams of warm water. And after, we will need some olive oil, some rosemary and some sea salt to sprinkle on the top. So just to get started, I'm going to clear everything off to one side. I'm going to keep the flour and the water, and I'll just move everything else to one side. The yeast I want to bloom, so I have the water, it's about 28 degrees, so it's warm, and I'm going to put the yeast into it. So the idea of putting the yeast into the warm water is to stimulate fermentation. Okay, it stimulates the yeast, warms it up, and it activates it. So then, just to help the yeast along, I'm going to add in the sugar. Sugar is going to provide a lot more food, and it will activate the yeast an awful lot quicker. I'll dissolve that in there. And now I'm going to just put the flour into the middle of my mixing area. So I'm going to mix on the table, and I just have a plastic scraper here. I'm going to create a bay. So you can see there, I'm just creating a little bay so that I can put the liquid in there and it's not going to flow all over the table. So here's my yeast and water. I'm going to put that into the center of the bay. And just make sure that you get all the sugar out of the bottom. So here I have my salt. I'm just going to put the salt in there. Dissolve it. I'm also going to put in the rosemary. It's just going to get hydrated there a little bit with the water. And lastly, I'm just going to pour in the olive oil. Now that we have all the ingredients in place, I'm just going to gradually bring from the inside of the bay some of the flour, and I'm just going to mix it until I start to get a paste. So it's very important that you don't breach the little bay, otherwise the water will flow all over the table. So I'm just bringing that in a little bit at a time, and I'm mixing it to create a paste. So it's not a very highly hydrated dough. There's 250 grams of water to 500 grams of flour, so it's roughly 50% hydrated. And there you can see I'm just starting to form a paste there. Things are coming together nicely. So again, I'm just scratching that from the inside. You can see that the paste is getting a little bit thicker in the middle. So I'm just rotating my fingers on the table here and bringing in the flour from the edge. So once it gets thick enough, and it looks like it's not going to flow all over the table, so you can see where it is now, I'm just going to start bringing in the flour from the outside. I'm just turning it over on itself. So what I want to do is I just want to make sure that all of the flour becomes hydrated. In other words, all the flour particles are going to be covered with water. And this is quite easy. You can clean your table using your scraper and just toss it over on itself initially. You can see that's coming nicely together. You can chop down with your scraper, left and right, up and down. Just helps to bring it all together. And you can see it's already forming a nice clump of dough in the middle of my table. So I'm just pressing that into itself so that it's nice and cohesive. Great. So I have the semblance of a dough here now together, so I'm just going to scrape off the plastic scraper. I'm going to get my hands all into it here and dirty. So I'm just going to start stretching the dough with my hand. Mixing all of that, so if there's still any little dry bits of flour on the table, just rotate the dough around, pick it all up. The table should be nice and clean. And there should be no pieces of flour anywhere on the table left. So you can see I have my dough here and I'm not using any flour. And I'm just stretching the dough out because I want to develop the dough. So it's interesting to watch the dough develop once you hydrate it. You can see it's come together in a plastic mass. So if we try to make a window pane here, as I stretch it thin, like a piece of chewing gum, a hole forms, okay? So we need to develop the dough a lot more to get it nice and stretchy. And the whole idea is that you're going to be able to trap the CO2 gas during the fermentation process. The other nice thing about hand mixing is that the heat of your hand provides heat for the dough, so it keeps it nice and warm. Now, as I said, you can mix this on a machine if you have one, or you can mix it in a bowl if you wish. But for me, I'm just doing this on the table. So if you watch my actions, I'm stretching with the palm of my hand. I'm pushing the dough out and coiling it back. And the whole process will take about 7 to 10 minutes. So I'm just going to keep stretching that. And you can see the surface, how rough. It's extremely rough looking, a lot of rough edges. So you'll know when you're getting close because the texture of the dough will change. It will start to become very smooth. So just keep mixing that. Again, you can see I'm not adding flour. There's no need to add flour. It's only 50% hydration, but it does require a good bit of physical work. So I'm switching hands left to right. So I'm going to continue to mix this for about another 5 minutes, just stretching it out on the table. So we'll take one more look. You can see it's still quite rough. And have we a window pane yet? No, it's still breaking. So we'll just continue to mix. So I've just finished mixing by hand, and we can just see the stage of development of the dough. As I lift it up, you can see it's developing a nice window pane. It's translucent, it's not tearing, so our dough is mixed. So I just have a tiny little dust of flour on the table, and I'm just going to gather the dough together in a ball. Okay, just knead it into a nice little ball, and I'm going to put it into a greased bowl like that. I'm just going to cover it with a little bit of cling film. I'm going to set it aside and leave it for 20 minutes. So the reason I put the cling film on is to prevent the dough from skinning. The last thing you want is a hard crust to form on the dough, otherwise it's going to ruin your focaccia bread. So I'm going to set this aside now for 20 minutes, and when we come back we'll divide it into two 400-gram pieces. So in the meantime, I've prepared 2 trays. So I have 2 little trays and 2 little pieces of parchment paper, and I'm going to put each of the dough on these for proofing. So I'm just going to set those to one side as well. We'll come back in 20 minutes and you can see the level that the dough is at. It'll already have started to ferment and grow. You're welcome back. So this is the focaccia after 20 minutes. So you can see that it is almost halved in size, and I have my scale set on here, so I'm going to put a little bit of dusting flour on it, and I'm just going to take it out of the bowl, leave the bowl to one side. The handy way of doing this really is just spread it out on the table, flatten it down, and imagine a line. You can even draw it with your finger roughly halfway. So I'm just going to chop it through and put one half up on the scale and see where we are. So we're looking for 400 grams. It's 480. So I can take some off that. 430. It's 400. So that we don't have any waste, I'm just going to weigh the balance. So it's 80 grams, so I'm going to just put the 40 grams into each one. So this 40 and 40. Now I'm going to put the scale again to one side. We don't need it. So I have my 2 pieces of focaccia. I'll just go through very simple hand moulding. So I'm going to fold it in like a Swiss roll. You can see the way the end tapers in here, just straighten it out so it's nice and square, and fold it over again. And I'm going to press down gently on it, and then I'm going to present the seam up, and I'm going to roll it in again, and you can see I have no flour on the table whatsoever, none. So I'm just going to pull the ball towards myself. See it like that? So what happens is the tail of the dough drags, it sticks to the table, and as I pull it in, you can see here it stretches and it gets to form a nice firm ball or boule. So that's one done. I'm going to do the same with this guy. So you can see he's tapered in here a little bit. So just flatten it out into a pad. Imagine a rectangle in your head. Get it as close to a rectangle as you can. So I'm going to fold it in like a Swiss roll and roll it over on itself. Press down. So when I turn it over, the seam is going to be in the middle. And again, I'm just going to press it out gently. I'm going to roll it in, as I said, just like a Swiss roll, and just be fussy. Bring that out so the edge is nice and straight. Roll it over. And now we can make a ball. So I'm leaving the table undusted with flour. I'm just going to pull towards myself, rotate, pull, rotate, pull, rotate. And each time I pull, you can see it's building up the strength here in the dough. So I now have my 2 boules for the focaccia, and I'm just going to let them rest now and recover for about another 15 minutes. So I'm just going to cover them with some plastic, and I leave them there for 15 minutes. And then using a rolling pin, we're going to roll them out and we'll put them on the trays for proofing. So our dough has had its intermediate proof. I'm just going to take it out of the plastic. And I'm just going to flour the table very gently. A little bit of flour on the table. A little bit of flour on the focaccias themselves. So one of the things I talk about a lot, especially making pastry, is I call it ice hockey puck technique. So basically your dough should slide across the table like an ice hockey puck. You can see it's not stuck. Whereas if I put that over on the top that I haven't dusted, you can see what happens. It's literally not going anywhere, okay? So if you try to roll this, it's going to stick to the table and you're not going to get a nice uniform shape. Whereas if it's not stuck and it's dusted and it slides, it's going to be much easier to roll. So I have a very expensive implement here. This is my rolling pin. It's actually a brush handle for doing small pieces like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll it out. And one of the easy ways to start in this is literally dip the two pieces in flour and press it flat with your hand. And then peel them off each other. And you can see already you have a nice round shape. So I'm going to roll in this direction, roll out, and you can see that the dough is flowing on the table. Watch, it's flowing, it's not sticking. See that? So I'm going up and back. And then this is very important. So I have a flour line up here and I have no flour down here. So I'm going to dip it into the flour line and I'm going to take it back, and you can see that it's not stuck to the table. It's flowing. So I've rotated the dough 90 degrees and then I'm going to roll again, and you can see once more that the dough is rolling outwards. It's not sticking, and back. So I go up and back, and you can see it's slightly oval in shape. So I'm going to into the flour again and back. So I'm going to go up once more and down once more. So I'm not putting too much pressure on the rolling pin, just literally the weight of the rolling pin. I'm going to go up once more, back once more. So you can see that by doing it in this way, by rotating it at 90 degrees every time you roll, it preserves a really nice round shape on the dough as well. So I'm going to place this guy on the tray. I'm just going to cover it with plastic again and put it aside for its proof. And the proof time is going to be between 30 and 40 minutes. So I'm going to go on to the second piece now. So the same again. I have some flour there and I have a flour line. Okay. So my dough isn't stuck. And then I'm going to roll up. Again, watch how the dough flows. It's not stuck. And back. Rotate 90 degrees. Roll up and roll back. Into the flour again. Rotate. Roll up and roll back. So one of the things you can do if you want to make a really nice crispy base is you can get some maize grits. So I have maize grits here, and I'm going to put maize grits on the table. Okay. I'm just going to roll that into it, and we roll it out once more. Rotate again 90 degrees. You can see that there's a nice little bit of the maize has stuck to the bottom of the dough, and that'll just make it nice and crispy when it bakes out. So again, I'm just going to put that onto the tray. I'm going to cover it for proof for 30 to 40 minutes. And when it's proofed, we'll come back and we'll finish the brushing and the garnishing of the focaccia bread. Okay, so our dough has proofed. It's taken about 40 minutes. And you can see that it has doubled in size almost, and it's got a nice bow shape on it. So just to check and make sure that it's properly proofed, I'm just going to increase magnification here for a second. And I'm just going to draw your attention to the edge. So I'm going to dip my finger in flour, and you can see here if I make an indentation with my finger, if the indentation stays and pushes out towards you a little bit, that means that your dough is proofed. If I had pushed in, for instance, on it, and it didn't make an indentation and sprang right back, that's a good indicator that it needs more proof time. So just be aware of that. Always check, just press it gently, and you can see the indentation there. Watch again, I push, and it pushes back out against me. So there's still a lot of strength left in the dough. If you overproof it that'll just collapse. So just make sure that you don't overproof it. So you can see our focaccia is nicely proofed. It's a nice round bell shape on the dough. And you can see again the indentation there just about comes out when I touch it. But remains, you can see that I've touched it. That's very important. So I'm going to get a brush there with some olive oil. But before I do that, I'm just going to get my fingers and dip them into flour. And keep my fingers straight. I'm just going to come down a straight line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. Okay. I'm going to do the same with the other one. So I'm going to brush the bread with olive oil. So I'm using virgin olive oil, which is really nice. And then for the classic focaccia, like what we make in class with the school, just have some rosemary here. I'm just going to dredge some rosemary over the top. And that's going to go into the oven. But before it goes in then, I have some Atlantic sea salt, you can see it here. Just going to throw a bit of the salt around the top. Gives it a really nice salty flavour. So I'm going to set that to one side. And we have the second one here. So with that, we're just going to make a variation. I'm just going to brush that again with some nice olive oil. Some virgin olive oil. I'm using very little pressure on the brush. So I'm literally using the weight of the brush itself. I'm going to keep that olive oil then for when they come out of the oven, because I'll give them a second brushing. So we can pimp this and we can make it really nice. Put a little bit more rosemary on it. Some sea salt. Then what I've done is I've got some nice cherry tomatoes. And I'm just going to lay them out on the bread, just for a little bit of variety. And when it comes out of the oven, I also have some fresh basil that I'll use to garnish it. Just give it some nice colour. So you can see there we have the two varieties. We have the pimped one with the cherry tomatoes. We just have the ordinary one there with the olive oil and the sea salt. So I'm going to put those into the oven and we'll bake them. And they're going to take about 20 to 25 minutes to bake. Okay, so I'm just going to slide them into the oven. So it's at 220 degrees. I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes. One little thing I'm going to do, just to get some steam into the oven, I'm going to use a garden sprayer. I'm just going to spray some water in on the bottom. And that will create some steam and it will just prevent the crust from forming on the bread. And we'll get it. Supermarket, I bought some fresh basil. So I'm just going to garnish that with some nice basil leaves, just to give it a bit of colour, flavour, eye appeal. So you can very easily pimp your bread, make it look very attractive. Very nice snack to eat at any time of the day. If you're hosting a party or having people over, very simple, very effective. and you can see the brown, the green and the cherry tomato red, they go very well together. Very easy to produce and a very, very nice bread. So there it is, guys. That's the focaccia video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next video, which will be coming soon. Thank you.